Mm-hmm. And we're live with the Business Heroes Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Victor Pop.
And I am Mia Powell. And this show was created because we love to highlight business heroes, people that are pursuing passion, profit, and purpose so that they can change the world for good. And you know what, Victor? Today's show is really powerful to me. Like when I think about the title, Teacher Burnout, like this is so serious. And I'm really hoping that as you're watching this, that you're calling, texting friends, having them to get ready to get on this show. Because if you know educators, you know they're going to need to hear the information that we have today. And we have just an amazing person that's going to be sharing their story with us and also their triumphs and challenges. And so you definitely want to watch this show today, okay? And even if you're not a teacher, you're not an educator, watch the show. It's going to be amazing. Like you're going to hear things that you need to hear that are going to be so helpful, especially as a parent, right? And it's just dear to me being a former teacher and principal myself. This topic it needs to be discussed, and I'm glad that we're doing it.
Yeah. And, you know, again, this is for everybody. It's not just for teachers. It's just that we are talking with a teacher and educator today. But burnout can happen all kind of places. Caregivers, parents, family, whatever, field that you're in. Anyone can experience burnout if they are, I guess, overworked, underpaid, or, whatever stress factors might be involved. And if you do not recognize burnout, you can start having compassion fatigue, where, once, where you were caring, you could, I don't know. I mean, it really can go a whole lot of ways. And that's why self-care is so important, whatever field you're in. But anyway, enough about that.
Yes. And I know we're talking about burnout, but I actually want to highlight a special word that we have for you for today. And as I was thinking about our show, I was thinking about the word chosen. And somebody could say, well, Mia, we're talking about burnout here. We're talking about the need to, self-care, take a break, be able to, have perspective changes, all these different things come into healing from burnout, right? But I wanted to insert this word, the word chosen. And one definition says, chosen means having been selected as the best or most appropriate. Having been selected as the best or most appropriate. And I just want to toss in there, is it possible that burnout is a gift? Right. We're going to talk about it. I don't want to just go there now. I want to bring in our guest. But I just wonder.
That's quite a cliffhanger.
It's quite a cliffhanger, but I want us to consider this as we talk about the show today. Burnout as a gift, something that has been chosen, right? It's the best thing selected. It's the most appropriate, but for what? All right. Without further ado, we've got to bring our person on. Please, let's do the bio. Let's hear about this amazing person who has been chosen, right? And so here we go. We're going to talk about Gavin Gaynair. And I feel like I always say your last name wrong.
No, I think you got it. Yeah. Yeah. So Gavin Gaynair, he's a 2007 graduate of Oakwood University. Woo woo. Alma mater. Yes, indeed. He holds a BS in biology education, and he's completed some graduate coursework in nonprofit management. He's been in the field of education for over 15 years. Even before he attended Oakwood, he was an ESE assistant. I think he'll tell us more about that. Or I think it might be something about English as a second language, possibly. Also worked with a special needs student, served as classroom assistant, and for people who are emotionally handicapped in the school system. After graduating from Oakwood, he spent some time in the jungles of India, serving as an interim principal for a school that was built by the National Association for the Prevention of Starvation.
Wow.
He also taught computers, I think biology, science, Bible, and computers, and teaching English as a second language. And he also spent 5 years working in the Southern New England Conference as a science teacher at Greater Boston Academy, and spent some time teaching biology for the Polk County School Board in Florida, about 3 years. Spent 5 years as the vice principal of Miami Union Adventist Academy, assisting in restructuring academic programs at the school. and conducting school accreditations conference-wide. And he has recently started Gaynair Consulting Services, where he offers educational consulting aimed towards school and professional growth, solutions advocacy aimed towards strategic and systematic institutional change,
Wow.
and provides freelance services such as virtual assistants and web design. And so, Gavin, it's great to have you on.
Yay!
We go way back with Gavin. He and Mia were in the jungles along with a larger group of in India. And we my group was in another village, but we all enjoyed serving the Lord together in
Yes.
India and some other places where we were blessed to work, Florida, throughout the United States. So, Gavin, thank you for being on this morning. We're glad that you joined us here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Man, whenever I think about the mission in India, I can't help but laugh really hard. That was
Yeah.
times.
Yeah, we were known as the Two Crunk Crew because we were too excited.
Yes.
We were too excited about what we were doing.
Yes. Praise God. There's a lot of good laughs on that mission.
Yes.
So wow. So for those who are meeting you for the first time, Gavin, please talk to the audience. Those who watch this later. We want to know. How did you get into this profession? Talk to us about how you landed as a teacher and all these amazing accolades. Where did it all start?
And please explain ESE, as well as how teaching was the last thing you wanted to do at some point in your life.
Yes.
And then here you are 15 plus years later, so come on.
Right. So, yeah, it's been over 15 years that I've been in the field of education. ESE actually stands for Exceptional Student Education. So
it's totally wrong.
Prior to inclusion, which right now, if a student has a learning disability, there is no difference between what classroom you put those students in respect to the larger population. So back in before inclusion, you had separated those students who had learning disabilities were separated from the students who did not have identified learning disabilities. And it is a good thing. I've experienced, teachers, depending on where they are, they'll say it's different. They preferred when it was separated because the job is easier if you're a mainstream teacher and you don't have to worry about learning disabilities. But for those students with learning disabilities, inclusion was a great thing because they were able to advance in their education compared to those separate classes. But going back to who I am, what I do, how did I get there? I have no idea. Well, I do know why education, but there have been many days along the way where it's like, why? My mother was a teacher. She taught elementary. And research said that first generation immigrants tend to get involved in careers that are public servant related. So if you're a first generation immigrant, you tend to fall into any of the careers such as education, nursing, anything that is in the area of public service. And that's very interesting that we do that, I guess, because we come to America looking for opportunities and we just find it that speaks to us in one way or another. Now, of course, I came to the U.S. when I was 7, so I wasn't even thinking about that. I didn't know I would have to spend the rest of my life working.
Right.
But as I matriculated through elementary and middle school, I got to middle school, and everybody knows how middle school is. If you have middle school children of your own, sometimes it can be a challenge. Right. And I can remember clearly in middle school, remembering we had a teacher that would always yell. And one day after school, my friends and we were talking, and one of my friends is like, when I grow up, I'm going to be a teacher. And everybody's like, now, why would you want to be a teacher? And he said, because when I become a teacher, I get to yell at everybody the way that our teacher yells at us. And then everybody else in the group is like, yeah, man, I want to be a teacher too. So I can yell at everybody and be in charge.
Wow.
And I'm looking at them and thinking, man, I would never want to be a teacher, because then I would have to deal with people like you guys. And I wouldn't want, I wouldn't want that stress. And I maintained that attitude for some time. And, my mom was a teacher, and saw her working hard and diligently and coming home. People, they go to work, they come home. They usually come home, right? But my mom would come home and bring work home with her every single day. Every single day. So it's like, why would anybody want to be a teacher when it's not just, a 9 to 5, but it's your entire life? It takes up much of your time, effort, energy, and your spirit.
Mm.
So I maintained that attitude, and it was at the end of my junior year at high school where things shifted. And I was literally, I wasn't thinking about, once you're a junior, towards the end of your junior year, you start to think about college and what you want to do. But I wasn't thinking along the way of education or anything like that. But I was sitting in my science class. Everybody's doing independent work, so the classroom is quiet. Everybody's focused doing what they're supposed to do. And I hear this voice like behind me saying, "Gavin, you should be a teacher." And I looked around. Like, what? Who's talking? I didn't have friends in that classroom, so I had no idea who's talking to me. So I'm looking around trying to figure out who's talking to me, telling me I'm supposed to be a teacher, like, me. So I didn't see anybody talking to me. Everybody was doing their work. So I continued doing my work, and I heard that voice again saying, "Gavin, you should be a teacher." And I figured that was the voice of, the Spirit of God talking to me, telling me that this is a path that I should consider. So my senior year of high school, I took a class that was an introduction to education. And that's where my journey in education started. And my passion for education actually started with that class, senior year of high school. Went to college, did community college for a couple of years in the idea of going into education, and then transferred to Oakwood. And you know how Oakwood is. Sometimes they make you stay there as long as possible. So I spent 4 wonderful years at Oakwood, completing a degree in biology education, which certifies me to teach grades 6 through 12. And after that, I ended up before I went to Oakwood, I was actually a teacher's assistant, like I said, ESC assistant. For the first semester, I was 19 years old when I got the job at the high school I graduated from in Osceola County. And I was hired to be a one-on-one aide with a student who was legally blind and also had seizures. So my job was basically to walk around with him, made sure he got to his classes, and to watch for any signs of seizure activity. And from there, the year after, they actually took me from that position. The student did not return. So they took me, rather than letting me go, they moved me from that position and placed me into a self-contained classroom with students who were deemed emotionally handicapped. And I've never understood why they call it that. But basically, at the end of the day, it's because the kids have trouble maintaining their anger issues. So these are kids who were expelled from school, were sent to an alternative school, a behavioral intervention type of institution. And before they're coming back now, it is a public school, so they don't really have the choice to say, no, we don't want these kids in our school. You have to take them. So once they get out of that program, they come back to the school. But before being introduced back into the mainstream population, they had to go through this classroom that was self-contained, known as an emotionally handicapped, setting. And so the kids were in the classroom all day, and it was basically like an elementary setting where they're with the same teacher throughout the day, and that teacher teaches different subjects. And I was there to help that teacher to maintain, discipline, make sure everything is going okay. And we actually had a padded room in that classroom. That's how crazy it was.
Wow.
So I did that for a year. And then I went to Oakwood, did education 4 years, joined NAPS, worked with NAPS. And I can tell you that the largest part of my education wasn't what we did in the classroom at Oakwood. Oakwood is a great place, but it was actually the things that we did in NAPS. Mm-hmm. And I contribute a lot of my success as an educator to NAPS because NAPS taught us a lot of things hands-on. Mm-hmm. And it taught us a lot of compassion, how to have compassion. And unfortunately, a lot of educators do end up in education for whatever reason, and they lack compassion, or they come into it with compassion, but quickly lose it because it is a stressful environment. So NAPS was able to help develop that. After NAPS, I went to,
Sorry, Gavin, quick
yeah,
interruption. So some people might be coming on later that might not know what NAPS is. So if you could
okay,
break touch
yes.
on that.
So NAPS is the National Association for Prevention of Starvation, which is a nonprofit group largely run by college students that attend Oakwood University. They do have branches throughout the world, so it's not just that one spot. So it's an international organization. The aim is to provide relief and spiritual, introduction to Christ through the ministry that it does.
Awesome.
All right.
So with NAPS, while I was in NAPS, again, we talked that at the beginning of the show, we went to India and we helped to build a school for African Indians known as the City. The City people are a group of Indians largely unknown to the world and even unknown to the people who actually live in India. But they suffer, they're basically neglected. Because if you can remember in the past, India used to have the caste system. The City people were not even a part of that. So if you think about the lowest caste, the City people were not even considered. But after slavery ended in India, they were pushed into the jungle and forgotten, written out of history. So we helped to build a school specifically for a population in one of the villages for young students. At the time, I'm not sure now, but at the time it was from basically kindergarten up to 8th grade, as we would consider it here in the US. And I went there with NAPS, or for NAPS. NAPS sent me there right after I graduated from Oakwood. And I was there for about 5 months and working as a stand-in principal and a teacher. And that was a crazy experience because they're sending me to a country where they don't, I'm supposed to go to this school. And I was told that the kids, they speak English because the school, even though we just built the school actually, we built the physical building. The
Right.
school existed prior to that in a house
Right.
as the building was being created. So the kids were learning English, but when you're learning English from someone who speaks your own language, it doesn't work too well.
Right.
So I was told that the kids, they spoke English. You don't have to worry. You can go and you can teach. Yeah, the first day of school was kind of rough because nobody spoke English. And even the teachers, they spoke English, but they speak British English. So there was a lot of miscommunication between my American English and what they're used to. But I was there for about 5 months. I left, and I was, at the moment, I was so glad to leave because, again, it was so stressful being in charge of the school and trying to get the teachers. And these are the teachers at the time. They didn't study to be teachers. They were teachers mainly because it was an opportunity presented to them, and they've been through it, and they wanted to give back to their own people. But they weren't trained as teachers. So part of my job was to kind of get them to understand the duties of being a teacher. And when I left, I was so glad to leave. But the moment the plane landed back here in the US, I was ready to go back again. And I went back for 10 days a few months later. I came back in October, went back in January for 10 days. And I took one of my cousins with me so he can experience what it was like out there. And in those 10 days, one of the first things were they have sponsors from Austria who actually started the school. And they said for years, every year they come to India, they have never been able to speak to the children because the kids, they have not picked up the English. And that was the first time ever that they were able to go there and actually communicate with the kids.
Wow, that is
So, of
so
course,
powerful.
I felt that pulling to go back to India, and I went back to India again for another 5 months by myself that time to teach and to be with the students. So that was one of the greatest experiences of my life, was being in India and being a teacher in India. So
Man, that's amazing. I mean, are y'all hearing this? Like, she's coming out the gate with some humongous gems. Like, first of all, you're going to a historical set of people
yes.
that have been pushed into the jungles. They've been rejected by their own country. Okay. And you are now not only there to serve them, but look at how many hats you had on. I mean, you're a teacher, you're a trainer, you're a parent,
Principal.
you're the
Yeah.
principal. You're also not, you don't know the language and you're there by yourself. This
Right.
is,
Hard.
yeah, like
That is hard.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. You know, the whole time you spoke about it, you had a huge smile on your face. Like you were, you know, like you look like, wow, this was an opportunity in time that you cherish. And so that's really amazing.
Right.
And I know some people look, that's risk, you know, but
It
you,
was.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. And for those of you that were wondering who the city people are, we're not saying CITY, SIDDI. If you want to Google that, the city people, SIDDI in India, you'll get to learn a bit more about their history, you know, based on what we were saying.
Yeah.
So,
And that's something I love about teachers. You know, like obviously, you know, sometimes when people think about the topic that we're speaking on, burnout, right? I don't know about you, but I remember when I was experiencing burnout, the voice in my head was, it's because you're lazy, Mia. You know what I mean? It's because
Yeah.
you're lazy. You know, you don't want to work hard anymore, or you're just selfish, you know?
Yeah.
And it's totally a lie. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, it's such a lie, but it seems like the truth. And I'm only highlighting that to say, as I listen to you, look at what you as a teacher were willing to subject yourself to
Yeah.
for the sake of the people. You know, that's what teachers do. They subject themselves to circumstances that are unfathomable, but it's for the sake of the people, you know, in many cases. And so, wow. But anyway, I want to throw the mic back to you and say, so
Yeah.
that's a huge triumph. So like, how did you, you know, wind up back in the States, and what was it like to now be a teacher here in America?
Yeah, so here in America is much different than it was in India, because in India they had, when I say they had nothing, they had nothing at the time anyway, that I was there. It was a boarding school. So when you said I was also a parent, you know, I didn't always stay there, but some nights I did with the students. But they had nothing. The same rooms they used for classroom in the day were turned into bedrooms at night. And by bedrooms, I mean all they did was sleep. They, in the day, they sat on the floor. Throughout the day, everything they did was on the floor. And at night, they laid on the floor and slept on the floor together. The boys in one room, the girls in another classroom.
Wow.
Coming to, of course, the U.S., where there's a lot of we do have a lot of financing for our educational system, and we require a lot more. And actually, in India, they don't. The one of the main biggest corruptions that, you know, the teachers would tell me there. One of the biggest corruptions in India is education. It's not a priority. So much so that with my students, you know, I had my kids were like scoring 50%, 60%, 70% on their tests. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm failing these kids. They're not passing my class. And then one of the teachers are like, what are you talking about? 30% is passing.
Wow.
So going from that to here in the US, there's a lot more that we expect of our students. And the American education system is not the best in the world. We all know that.
Sorry, repeat that. It kind of stuck. You said here in the U.S. there's a lot more.
That a lot more is required in terms of standards and what it takes for students to pass. And yeah, even though our education system in the US is not the best in the world, it is still one of the better ones in the world. We are far better off than many countries, especially since we do have education for free up to 12th grade. Can't wait till we see it free for college as well.
Right.
So stepping into a classroom here in the US, there are different systems, and I've worked in two different systems. I've worked in private education, Adventist education, and I've worked in public education. And the two are different. So I started off, I said I would go with whichever opened up first, whichever door opened first. That's the system that I was going to go in. I didn't go to school to become an Adventist teacher. I went to school with the idea that I would be a public school educator because I went to public school all the way up to 12th grade. That's what I was familiar with. But at the time, I said I would take whichever job came first. And the door that opened up was in an Adventist school in Boston. So I went there and I worked there for 5 years. And out of my professional certified educational experience, that was the best 5 years of my life or career, not my life, but my career. The first 2 were very rough and I wanted to quit every day. But the latter 3 were great. It was amazing. And it
I believe it froze.
still stressful because no matter where you are in education, it's still stressful, but no matter where you are in education, it's still going to be stressful. But the thing that I had there was a strong bond with the students because you have them for 4 years. And as a science teacher, I taught every science. So every year I was teaching each class a different topic in science or a different subject. From there, I left because I wanted to be closer to my family in Florida. And I wanted to get away from the cold. And Boston is really expensive. So I came back to Florida, and my only option, because we don't have a lot of Adventist high schools here in the US. So I had to go into public education, and public education is great in its own right. But it was everything that I enjoyed about teaching. All of that was basically gone because rather than dealing with 30 students for 4 years, I'm now dealing with 150 students for 1 year. So you're not able to create the same bonds and connections with the student. You're only there to spew knowledge and hope that the kids, they catch it.
Right.
So I did that for 3 years. I taught 7th grade for 1 year and then high school biology for 2 years for Polk County School Board. And then I got the opportunity to apply for a job in Miami at another Adventist school to be a vice principal. When I was told to do it, I said, no, I'm not doing it because I'm not qualified. And truthfully, in the public system, I was not qualified. In the Adventist system, it was still questionable because I did not have a master's degree. But the principal said that this is the person I wanted. So it was agreed upon and they hired me. And that's when I realized how many gifts I had and didn't know. And those gifts were not, things that you picked up in the classroom. It was things learned along the way from day one all the way up to that point. When they say God prepares you for your future,
Come on.
that's the only way I can explain it.
Yeah.
And those 5 years, it was, again, very stressful is like the key term. Stressful is like the key term. But now, not only are you in charge of kids, you're now in charge of the teachers as well and the staff and everybody. There's only one person. The school, we had over 300 students and over 30 staff members. So the entire school, I'm in charge of everybody except for one, which is the principal above me. And that also includes now the parents. That includes the churches that support the school. That includes the community, in charge of academics, in charge of discipline, in charge of making sure the teachers are where they are supposed to be. They have their schedules, they have their equipment, they have everything they need. And the list goes on and on and on. And I did that for the last 5 years. And that's where I experienced my burnout. And I'm not going to say my burnout was only because of that job, because it wasn't. It was from day one. There are stresses that you carry along the way, and it builds up.
Yes.
So by the time I got to this job, it came to the point where all of it came together and it became too much, and it led to a sense of burnout. And I still love and I still have a passion for education. And that's why I decided to go ahead and create. Actually, the real reason I decided to create my own business was because at first I was excited about becoming unemployed because it meant not having to go to work. But I was raised in a family or that's not a very good word.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to hear that. And we don't want, when you're applying for jobs, they don't want to see that you have a streak of unemployment on your resume.
Right.
So I decided, 2 weeks before my last day, I decided to start my own business as a educational consultant. And within a couple of days, I had my fictitious business name and everything in place, and I was building my website. So by the time my time was up at that school, I was ready to start my business, and I already had a client that I was working with by July 1st came around.
Well, this is really, really powerful. I want us to go back just a little bit, if that's okay, Gavin,
Yes, yes,
because
yes,
you talked about the burnout. And I know, educators are going to see this. And I know burnout can happen different for, it can look different for each person.
yes.
Do you mind to just briefly say, like, how did you know? Because sometimes people don't realize that they're actually burned out. They just think, oh, I'm just tired, or oh, I'm just irritable, but what did it look like? How did you know that for you this was truly burnout and not just, a stint
Yeah,
of fatigue that teachers often get?
right. And I'm glad that you make that distinction because as teachers, every time April rolls around, we say we're burnt out. We feel and we think that we're burnt out. Come to realize that's not actually burnout. That is fatigueness. It is tired. You have extended yourself to the max for the school year. And that's why the summer months are so important. And teachers don't get paid for summers, just so everybody knows. They're only paid for 10 months out of the year. Um, but those 2 months are essential because it allows them to recover from the tiredness that they feel so that they can run for another 10 months. Burnout, it felt different, it felt different. And come to find out, it actually takes at least 2 years for someone to recover from burnout. And burnout has recently been defined by the World Health Organization, I believe, as a mental health concern,
Yes.
issue.
Yes.
But it is, and you've mentioned it yourself, Mia, that how it feels, that motivation that you have
Yeah.
kind of disappears. That compassion you have, it disappears. And you start to worry about you. I don't know. Your body knows it. Your body tells you that you've had enough and that you need to relax and calm down. Um, so I started to feel that right before the pandemic started. So 2019, 2020, at December and the beginning of January, teachers at my school, we had to make our intent known whether we will continue for the next school year. And it was at that point that I really had to evaluate, and I knew that I had too much on my plate. But then the pandemic hit. So it didn't matter if I had too much on my plate or not. There was a pandemic going on and nobody knew what was going on in the world. So the safest thing to do was to stay where I was at and continue to do what I was doing. So I continued doing all of that, carry that burden and that heavy plate for another 2.5 years.
Wow.
And finally, it came to the point where it was for my own. And to be honest, at the time that I left my job, it was a good job to have. It was a very good job because I started to get help. I was the only vice principal at the time when I started, but my last year, they hired a second vice principal. So I did have help. The workload was a little bit lighter, but there was still that sense of burnout. And I knew if I stayed where I was at, even though the work was easier, the burnout wasn't going away.
Right.
And being in the same environment would not help me to heal.
Right.
So I made that decision that it was in my best interest to move on.
This is so intense, right? Because I mean, I'm just thinking about us as educators. Like, we often are, trained, cultured. It's our default to think of others,
It is.
right? It's our nature to, is everybody else okay?
Yes.
And it can feel really foreign to say, am I okay?
Yes.
Because even if you say, well, no, I'm not okay, but it's like, well, I better get okay because
Right.
people are counting on me.
Right.
If I'm not there, this is not going to happen, or this is not going to happen, or what's going to happen. And it can feel really, you know, I don't know. Like I said, for me, it was like selfish. I felt
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
selfish that I was
Yeah.
making a decision and I thought that I was making the wrong decision.
Mhm.
But then the decision wound up being made for me when it came to my health.
Yeah.
Right.
Mercy.
And so, can you talk a little bit more about that? Like,
Yeah. I want to add on to that, and that's what you said. Being in a public servant, it doesn't matter what profession you're in. We all tend to feel that way. That's why we got into the career.
right.
That's why nurses become nurses. That's why you know anyone in public servant do what they does is because they want to help their community and they have a heart for it.
Mhm.
One of the things I've come to realize is that for those who work in private institutions that have a religious background, it's even worse for us because it's not just what the public expects of us to give from our heart, but it's because we've also been taught that God expects it too,
Woo,
you know?
woo. Go
But we
there.
have to come to
Go
the
there.
conclusion that God doesn't expect us to burn out, you know? We're taught that saying yes for God is good. If the church is asking for it, if a church institution is asking for it, then it's equivalent of God asking for it. So we should
Yes.
say yes.
Yes.
No, that's not true.
Man.
It's not true. God has given us the power to say no, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
And we have to, for those of us who work for religious institutions, we have to realize that it is also, even though it's attached to the church, it's still a business. It's
Yes.
still a business. So if the business portion of that institution is going to run as a business, then we as employees have to work as employees, you know?
Come
Still with
on.
the calling that we've been given, yes. Still because we're working for the Lord, yes. But at the end of the day, it's still a business, and there are more things that are important in our lives. Because
Right.
if you have a family, guess what God requires of us first? It's not
Mhm.
your job that's connected to the church. It's your family that's connected to your home.
Mm.
It's your health that's connected to your longevity. It's your spiritual journey that's connected to your eternity. You know,
Absolutely.
Wow.
so being able
Absolutely.
to learning how to say no and when to say no, and to learn that it's okay to say no, is
That,
important.
that just sounds like boundaries right there.
Yes.
That's really powerful because
Mm.
just like you said, I think the lines get really blurred when you
Mhm,
and it gets blurred anywhere. You're so right. Whether you're in the community or you're in the church community, as we could call
mhm.
it, but once it's like your soul is tied to it,
Yeah.
and I remember a thought that would haunt me was like, well, if you don't show up, these souls are going to perish, or
Right.
what's going to happen to these people if you don't
Yeah.
show up, and that would really bother me because I was like, oh man, if I leave it out on the field and I die, that's good
Mhm.
because at least I died for the souls, the martyr, my children, at least even if I die, at least I died for them, not realizing that we can't say what it will look like for us to become unhealthy.
Mhm.
The idea in my head was like, I'm just going to pass out in the classroom. You know what I
Right.
mean? And
Right.
that's it. And I thought that would be good. But the thought wasn't that, oh, actually, you'll wind up, you're going to possibly wind up in a behavioral health hospital. You're
Mhm.
actually going to be
Right.
the teacher that's yelling at the kids all the time.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
you said at the beginning of your story, your teacher is always yelling at everybody. And it
Yeah.
makes you wonder, hey, what is your impact really? Am I really being a positive impact for the kids? What am I actually inculcating
Right.
here when they see that I am not healthy, that I'm not really taking care of myself, that I don't have a
Patience.
quality of life
Yeah.
Mm.
for the sake of this job or this
Right.
mission?
Mhm.
And what is a quality of life?
Yeah.
What is a life? What
Right.
what what has God made available for us?
Mm.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you make this decision. I mean, this is hard. Like, did you face backlash?
I did not. No, I did not. Because going back to the 1920, prior to the pandemic, when I came to the realization that it was too much, I did speak with my boss about it. I did voice my what I was going through and how I felt. So it was known. So by the time I turned in my resignation letter 2.5, well, 2 years later, it was already it was expected.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't keep it quiet that this is what I was going through. I did let it know. And that's one of the things, sometimes people will stay quiet, and then when they step away, they're seen as the enemy, like you're making a decision against us. So that's one of the good things that I did do. I did vocalize it. And I did let everyone know when I did turn in my resignation letter. It was 6 months before. So everybody knew that I would be leaving, and everybody was able to come to an acceptance of it. Now, they were sad. They were very sad that this was the decision that I was making. They would have, even now, I have people who would say, "Hey, come back. Your seat is, we'll give you back, we'll give you back a position." So it was more so people being sad that I was leaving than being angry that I made that decision.
Now, this is a little bit of a pivot, but you talked about educators and what they're experiencing. Can you just speak a little bit to those of us who are parents?
Yeah.
And our kids are in these different educational systems, right? And we know the systems, we want to believe, right, that it's meant well. The goal is to do well,
Yes.
to do the children well. But what are some things that parents we should what advice would you give to parents, you being an educator? As an
Yeah.
educator, what advice would you give to parents based on your observation of youth?
Yes. So the first advice I would give to parents is understanding that the first place for education to take place is in the home. Nobody can educate your child like you can. And although we send our children to school, at the end of the day, the schools, technically they are, but the schools are not responsible for educating your child,
Mm.
because the school has a success record of failing many children. And that's not necessarily the school's fault. There's a
That was
whole
a
bunch
heavy
of
one, wasn't it?
there are a whole bunch of dynamics that affect, from preschool all the way up to 12th grade. There's so many dynamics that takes place in a child's life that the school by itself does not have the ability to ensure a child succeeds. But if in the home the child understands that they can succeed, they are expected to succeed, and the parents have the belief in them to succeed, they will succeed. And a sad thing, as an educator, I've experienced many parents who do not believe in their own children.
Mm.
I've experienced many parents who send their kids to school because it's a relief. I've experienced many situations where kids, they come to school simply because the school, if it's a public school, provides free breakfast, it provides free lunch. And I've seen kids just sit in my classroom or other teachers' classroom. And that's the only reason they're there, is because in order for them to ensure that they have those meals, and that's because you don't know what people are struggling with in their homes.
Right.
But for some kids, it's an escape from their home,
Right.
because there's this sense of abuse that's going on, and sometimes parents don't even realize that there are abusers. So parents have to be careful on how they speak to their kids. There's a verse, what does it say? That life and death is in the power of the tongue. And when it comes to children, when it comes to young people, no one has more of a stronger influence on them in terms of words spoken than their parents. So my number one encourager is to speak life into your kids, to let them know that they can succeed academically. Do all kids need to graduate from high school and go to college? No, they don't. Kids can be successful by taking different routes.
Right.
Success. But the key is for them to know that they can achieve success, that whatever God-given goals they have, they can attain it. And they just have to know that they have the ability to figure that out and to be successful. There's that. The other thing I would tell parents is to be kind to your children's teachers. You don't know how far your kindness will go in a teacher's life. You don't know what they're experiencing with other students and those students' parents. You don't know the load that they carry at the institution that they work at. So just you as a parent simply being kind and letting the teacher know that you are on their side, it goes a long way. And the educational system has changed so much that it used to be where if the teacher says you did something wrong in class, you're in trouble. Now it's if the student does something wrong in class, it's the teacher is in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent, you don't want that to happen. Never let your child know that you are angry with their teacher. It's fine for you to be angry with the teacher. It's okay, because teachers do make mistakes. They do mess up. They do at times they do things wrong or not the best way. So it's okay for you to be mad at your child's teacher, but never let your child know that you're mad or that you disagree with the teacher. Because what will end up happening is that child will pick up the same attitude and will display that same attitude to the teacher. And it makes the teacher's job that much harder and difficult for them to get that student, your child, where your child needs to be or has the ability to be.
Wow, these are really good
Wow.
gems. I have two things. I know we're just about out of time, and
Yeah.
we've got to plug his consulting service. So I guess it's three things that I want us to do. So one, if you can briefly tell us what are two or three things you're doing now to just kind of recover. So it can be an idea for those who may see it. And then I have a little, this is going to be an interesting question I have for you, but it's why I chose the word chosen.
Yeah.
So what are some things you're doing to kind of heal from your experience?
Well, rest is a big part. Rest is big, and telling myself that it's okay. Telling myself that it's okay, because, like I said, the day that I left my job, I know that I left a good thing.
Yeah.
I left a good position. I left a good. Well, education doesn't pay well, but in terms of education, it was paying decent. Um, but telling myself it was okay to do that, because if regret sets in, that can lead to other mental
Yes.
crises. So rest and letting myself know that it is okay and it will be okay.
It was necessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you for that. So that's so true. When I started to study just as a mental health coach, I was like, wow, rest is actually considered productive. Like this is a a productivity measure.
Yeah.
Really? Because I just thought rest was for, I'll rest when I die once again, but it's like, wow, what if God wants me to live?
Right.
You
Right.
know, I have come that you may have life and that you may
Mhm.
have it more abundantly. And
Mhm.
so, wow. So, what I want to ask you is okay, this might be hard for some people, but like, I want us to use our imagination, right? And I want you to imagine what would it be like to do your passion without the, I'm going to call it ropes,
Yeah.
or there were things that you saw in education that you were like, man, I'd love to change this, or I'd love to change that, or if
Yeah.
it was me, I'd set it up this way.
Mhm.
Just using your imagination. No disqualifiers like, well, that's not realistic, or oh, the government won't let me, or whatever. Scrapping all that, in your imagination, what would it look like to set up a system where you are doing your passion? Could you just take a moment to think about that and share it with us?
Well, I think just simply being in a place where true collaboration takes place, that would be it. So instituting change, in the last 5 years, I found that passion that I do enjoy instituting change. But instituting change without collaboration is not as fun or enjoyable as instituting change with true collaboration. So just being able to be in a place where they want change and they're willing to work together to create change. And me being a part of that would be that ideal.
Good. What is one change that you would want to see?
In terms of education, yeah.
If that's how you'd like to answer, yes.
Well, that's such a loaded question. I mean, there's just so much. um, Put me if I were to enter any institution, the number one change that I would want to see is simply collaboration. Mm-hmm. Because if you have collaboration, everything else is possible.
Mm-hmm. And by that, it's like you're saying people can come together with their different ideas and thoughts,
teamwork,
and see how to implement things in alignment for the greater good.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And also systematically as well. Mm-hmm. And that's what when you collaborate with others, it does help for you to create systematic change, because it's not just what you see, it's what we all see. And we all have an input on that, so that we can systematically create, change.
That's so powerful. And I guess that's when I hear you say that, it does truly lead me back to the word we started the show with, being chosen. I feel that when burnout hit me, or really mental illness hit me, it was so humiliating. And I didn't think I would recover. I didn't think I wanted to. But looking back now, I see that that was a chosen moment in time for certain beliefs that I had about myself, about God, about the world, that needed to be flushed out. It was like it was a chosen moment in time to be reborn, to be renewed, and to create something totally different from what I'd known. Yeah. And as we do our organization Pain Unwasted, it's like daring to believe bigger and daring to actually create something that's not there. The creation. You create something that does not exist, and of course there's schools that exist, or there's mental health institutions that exist, but they're not going to exist in the way that God created us to bring forth into this world. Mm-hmm. And it makes me wonder, as I listen to you, as I think about all the credentials that Victor was reading, like, I just wonder, like, this moment in time, you've been chosen, chosen to step away into a new reality altogether, and I'm really excited for you, Gavin. I'm excited for how God is going to just miraculously use every part of what you have experienced to create something that you didn't have any idea could happen,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I look forward to you coming back on the show with us so that we can hear about it,
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, if I can just say that I can be found on both Facebook and Instagram at Gaynair Consulting. And I do post a lot of things about leadership and how to become a better leader.
Yes, yes. And do reach out to his consulting services, because even we have been privileged to receive consulting from Gavin, and it was very, very helpful, very, very helpful. So I'm thankful that I could leverage your experience as we were, putting our programs together. So that's excellent, excellent, excellent. All right. Well, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Gavin, for being on with us. You don't have to run off, but we're just going to take you off screen in just a moment. And man, that was a powerful show.
Yes.
That was a powerful show. Really glad to have Gavin on. But as we're wrapping up, just wanted to encourage you all, if you know a teacher or just somebody that you think would be blessed by this episode, please share it, like and subscribe. And also want to remind you all, just a sponsored plug for the Make More Offers Challenge at wealthbiblically.com. The next one is starting next week, November 7th, and it's powerful, with Dr. Myron Golden teaching you how to make more offers with your business or your idea in a way that will not only bless those who need your services, but bless you in terms of income. And so check that out at wealthbiblically.com.
That's good.
Otherwise,
yes. All right. Well, please join us next week when we have another amazing business hero, and we can't wait to see you and talk again.
Yes. All right. Take care. God bless.